Good morning, Liam. Thanks for joining me, and I appreciate you doing this call virtually from Ireland. I wish I could be there in person. For the purposes of today, I'm actually going to be using a whiteboard. Can you see it okay? Great. So, as we discussed, we've talked about this notion of Oracle as a private cloud and platform as a service. So what I wanted to do today is spend the time purely focused in on that. And we're going to spend about 10 minutes today. So one of the things that you've talked about is how you're integrating the environment of London life and Irish life with Great West life. And that's a heady task. And one of the things you're looking for opportunities to explore how you can expedite that process. I think we have a solution for you, but I don't want to jump straight into that. So just to set out the premise of today's meeting, we've got two objectives. One is to get a common understanding around platform as a service. Secondly, is to really understand how a solution would align and address your goals. One of the things I did want to talk to you about, was paint a visual picture for you, is what I understand of your current environment. So imagine this, Liam. You're on the highway, or in the case of Ireland, you'd be on the motorway. You've got two lanes. You've got business in the outside lane, and you've got IT on the inside lane. Business is pushing at around about 70 to 80 miles per hour, and they're trying to break the speed limit all the time. IT, on the other hand, is not moving as quickly as that. We figure, based on your environment, on what your folks are telling us, that they're moving at around about 30 to 40 miles per hour. The good news is you're both on the same road, and you're both heading in the same direction. The challenge has now become is pressure from business to IT. And what that's coming out as, the symptoms of that are, there's a credibility gap. Business is now procuring outside the standards that you're trying to create, which is challenging for you as you try and adhere to the global standards set by Great West Life. And furthermore, they're not adhering to the practices that you've set out. So what's happening now is you've got this disconnect inside your organization. What does that mean for you? Well, that comes out in the form of many challenges, and I'll walk you through those. So first off, it's very clear that IT needs to move at the speed of business. Secondly, because of the way that now there's some road purchasing going on by the business as they try and stand up apps to compete in the highly competitive space you're in and be first to market in many occasions, what's happening is your ability to have good compliance, governance, and security is at jeopardy, so you need to improve compliance and security. Finally, two things. There's the legacy cost of your environment, so the IT cost of your environment, but secondly, because of the way that the business is procuring, you've got some inefficiencies. So we're looking to increase the IT cost efficiency mix. One of the things I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, and I know we've had some conversations and you set up that meeting with your CFO, where I shared with him the perspective from Gartner around the mix, cost mix. What companies are doing today is really looking at the way in which their costs are distributed across their IT environment. And here's the scary stats on it. First off, 63% of spend collaborates to what we call day-to-day operations. That's simply just keeping the lights on from a support and maintenance perspective. 21% is focused on organic growth of the business. And finally, 16% of that is for innovation and transformation. I know from your perspective, your CIO's perspective, and the CFO's perspective, you want to change that mix. So one of the things we're going to be talking to you today about is how our solution and platform as a service can enable that. So before we begin, I just want to get grounded on two things. One, you've heard it before, the Oracle stack. When you were open world, you saw many elements of that, but I just want to get grounded on that. And secondly, your current environment. As you know, we've got the Oracle stack. This goes all the way from storage, server, virtual machine, operating system, database, middleware to apps. You're familiar with that. But what we do is we try and take a complete view of this. And where we've created competitive advantage at Oracle is we offer these individually or all together. And when you start to take two components from our stack, Liam, this is where our pre-built, tested and certified environments around these gives you the efficiencies back to your environment. So when we think about that 63% of your day-to-day operations, things like implementation, things like maintaining your environment, this is where the Oracle stack drives a competitive advantage inside of complex customers like yourself. At the end of the day, you're familiar with this image. I just want to make it relative back to what we're trying to do with Platform as a Service. So, if we look at your environment, traditionally what you're seeing is your environment's deployed individual databases to serve individual applications on dedicated service infrastructure for different departments and lines of business. So we've created that busy environment, what we call a distributed environment. And that's no different to any environment we see. The downsides of that are becoming, we're seeing severe underutilization of technology infrastructure. Also, we're seeing siloed deployments. So the siloed environment is where we're seeing challenges, and that's where you're having the inability to meet the business needs. So I just want to walk you through these challenges in a bit more detail. So, as an organization, you are looking to be more agile. That agility is going to allow you to work with the business and be partners again versus them passing you on the highway or motorway. Secondly, we need to ensure that we're managing the risk with a view to reducing the risk. And then finally, we talked about it, one of the things that companies are interested in is changing the mix, but moreover, it's these terms of CapEx expense versus OpEx as ways to achieve it, versus a trade-off between the two. What we're looking at is how do we ultimately reduce the overall IT cost. So, any type of offering or any type of solution, there are going to need to be some key capabilities that this offers. Inside a Platform as a Service, I want to walk you through what they are. So, from Oracle's perspective, they require a standard shared platform, a service catalog. So what do we mean by that? Standardized database and middleware services for rapid and, more importantly, error-free deployment. Then we're looking at the chargeback, showback, use for cost allocation, which is a huge component to your business as you think about the acquisitions that Great Westlife have been through, and now that you're on board with that. Self-service, culturally I understand this notion of self-provisioning wouldn't sit well with you. However, you can provision, you can monitor, and you can manage in a centralized way. Next, multi-tenancy. This is where we ensure good data and resource allocation and isolation amongst the applications. I've talked about centralized management, and as you know from all the marketing that we did with you at Oracle Open World, engineered systems is the infrastructure that we're recommending and have been deploying successfully to support Platform as a Service. But before we get into that, let's just think about all these acronyms and terms that you'll hear. So, PaaS is a foundation for what we call infrastructure as a service. So I'm just going to split this out for you. You'll have heard these terms before. Software as a service, middleware as a service, database as a service, and then what we call infrastructure as a service. And it was funny, when I met with Dave Green, Dave actually said, we're interested in migrating our environment to Platform as a Service. And it was really good to hear that, because a lot of companies are now familiar with these notions, but what they've not got their heads around is how do we stand up and deploy our applications from a Platform as a Service perspective. Okay? So, moving on, what I want to do is walk you through some of the key capabilities and how they work against that. So, what we're saying is Oracle's in a unique position to allow you to realize the architecture in days rather than months. And that's what we're getting into here. When we start to talk to you about a solution, we're suggesting that the rapid deployment of that is going to align to your business goals. And it will allow you to start to deploy best-in-class services. And it can finally start to marry up and move in speed with the business. So, what are you doing with your existing environment? Well, what I'll share with you, Liam, don't know what happened there. I think our VPN went down. Anyway, glad I got you back. So, to continue where I left off, I talked to you about the capabilities that are essential to Platform as a Service. Now I just really want to talk to you about how do you adopt this based on your current environment. I know you've got elements of the integrated stack that you've had from a legacy environment with Oracle, but you've got multi-vendor environment too. So how do you make all this work? We're not saying it has to be a wholesale shift. This is not a rip and replace strategy to go over to Oracle. What I will share with you is this. This is not fad-based selling. This is not a good idea, we sell you more and then we move on to another idea. This is a transformational shift of your environment, and this is where you're going to see exponential gains. The good news is, though, we don't say to you, you've got to do it all at once. We piecemeal this out. So traditionally, what you do, we're going to consolidate inside of your architecture from an end state environment, the course over time, that is appropriate to your organization. So your culture and environment are going to dictate the pace of this. But traditionally, here's what we see from environments with customers. First up, siloed environment, right? And we've talked about that. We've talked about how you do have a siloed environment. But then what do you do next? Well, then we talk to you about standardization, right? And consolidation. So just think, the next time the business comes to you and says, we need to deploy now, you want to make sure it's inside of a standardized environment, and you look for an opportunity to consolidate. And then finally, what we're talking about is how do you then optimize that environment? Okay? So from our perspective, what we're looking to do is leverage your existing environment that you have here today, and we're going to move you forward over time on a journey. And this journey, the beauty of this journey is that from our perspective, traditionally what clients are seeing is for them to deploy something like this can take 5 years. This is something you can start with today. So what I want to talk to you through now is really how does this all tie together? So from our perspective, what we're saying is, if you align to the business through rapid deployment in a scalable way to handle future needs, you're going to increase your agility of the environment. Furthermore, proven consolidation platform will allow you to move at your own pace, will increase efficiency and reduce costs from both a CapEx and an OpEx perspective. And then finally, inside of all this, because you're going to mitigate business acting independently, you're going to be able to have better integration, better security and more predictable SLAs. And from our perspective, Liam, easier governance and accurate compliance. So, if you think about this, from our environment perspective, when you tie all this together, we're giving you one clear message. What we're allowing you to do is take your challenges, put it through this environment, and what you're effectively going to do is you're going to simplify IT. Okay. And so from that, what you're actually going to do is you're going to centralize, you're going to standardize, and then you're going to automate. And so from our perspective, all we're sharing with you is the Oracle Private Cloud as part of a platform as a service is allowing you to simplify IT. So what I want to share with you, Liam, because I know we're getting tight on time here, are the next steps. So from my perspective, here's what we need to do. I know you've been Oracle Open World, but we've got here in Calgary, next Wednesday, we've got a key event. I need some of your people to be attending that event. That will allow you to start to permeate this vision across your team, right? Secondly, we need to understand your environment a bit more. The maturity scale on which customers are on determines your journey, and the lifecycle management of that journey is determined by where you are on this maturity curve, or maturity steps. So what I'm going to share with you is we bring in a team, the Insights team, I mentioned this to you before, where we do a much deeper dive on where you are here and how we could articulate this journey to you in a meaningful way. And as I know you know, we're going to need the buy-in from your executives, so your CIO and CFO. I'd like to do that work, build up that knowledge, and then share that with them. Does that work for you, Liam? Great stuff. Looking forward to seeing you when you're back in Canada. Cheerio.